disaster, the worst nuclear catastrophe in history, finally light is re-emerging in the dead zone. The Chernobyl disaster was the worst nuclear accident in history, leaving countless terrible consequences in terms of costs and casualties. So please join Enigmatic Echoes in reviewing the consequences and mysteries surrounding this terrible Chernobyl disaster in today's video. Chernobyl, the worst nuclear disaster in history. On April 26, 1986, seconds before the disaster occurred, the temperature inside the core of reactor number 4, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, reached a record 4,650 degrees Celsius, nearly equal to the surface temperature of the sun at 5,500 degrees Celsius. When the reactor exploded, its power was equivalent to 66 tons of TNT explosive, completely capable of blowing up a 20-story building and destroying the entire internal core. The explosion released 28 tons of radioactive material from this reactor into the natural environment and caused a radioactive fire that lasted nearly 2 weeks. This led to the formation of huge radioactive gas and aerosol clouds, which penetrated the atmosphere and drifted north and west of the country with the wind direction. Several radioactive substances later fell back to the ground, often accompanied by rain. Among these radioactive dusts, notable substances include iodine-131, cesium-137, plutonium-239, all of which are extremely dangerous to humans, animals, and plants. The decay of these substances follows a unique pattern called half-life, the time required for their radioactive concentration to reduce by half. Specifically, for iodine-131, it accumulates rapidly in the thyroid gland and causes cancer in this organ. Cesium-137 remains in the soil for about 30 years and produces gamma rays with energy hundreds of thousands of times higher than rays from the sun. Finally, for plutonium-239, its half-life is 24,000 years, causing high radioactive toxicity in case of human inhalation. Despite the large area around the Chernobyl power plant being covered by radioactive particles, cleanup efforts focused on the Chernobyl exclusion zone within a 30 kilometers radius around the power plant. In this area, about 36 hours after the explosion occurred, an emergency evacuation of approximately 50,000 residents of Pripyat city, 3 kilometers from the nuclear power plant, which was also home to the families of workers. 47 workers died from acute radiation syndrome, directly caused by radiation from the disaster, and 9 children died from thyroid cancer. Out of a total of 4,000 cancer cases detected, about 600,000 people were exposed to the highest levels of radiation. Today, Pripyat is considered a ghost city. Its apartment buildings, playgrounds, and public monuments still remain. This is home to some wildlife species and a tourist attraction for adventurous visitors. However, while tens of thousands were forced to leave their homes in Pripyat after the disaster occurred, there were still some people who ignored the dangers and decided to stay in their villages despite the access ban. In the most exposed areas, radioactive particles contaminated everything, from bricks to livestock, even fallen leaves on the ground. These deadly particles are colorless, odorless, and tasteless and cannot be destroyed. Therefore, the only solution is to bury or seal these objects. Some residents stayed around the villages near the power plant to work on cleaning up radioactive materials. They literally leveled crops, cut down forests, and buried the surface soil layer. But that wasn't all. In some areas near the nuclear power plant, radiation levels are so dangerous that they can be fatal within minutes of exposure, especially when workers had to pick up radioactive debris and pour concrete to seal the reactor. According to estimates, the number of workers involved in disaster cleanup reached 500,000, mostly young people from across the Soviet Union. 10% of them are still alive today, and the official death toll announced by the Soviet Union due to direct consequences of this disaster was 31 people. Plants have not disappeared from Chernobyl. 33 years after the disaster, nature seems to be reclaiming its rights in the absence of regular human presence. Scientists have thoroughly studied the local flora and fauna and made many surprising discoveries. The effects of radioactive substances caused changes in the natural environment,
Trees died and their leaves turned red, hence the name red forest. Few animals survived after the radiation was released, but scientists have discovered genetic changes in surviving species. One might think that the Chernobyl area would remain lifeless due to the persistence of radiation over time. However, today in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, partly in Ukraine and Belarus, brown bears live, wolf packs, lynxes and Przewalski horses.
Dogs and more than 200 bird species still coexist with radioactive substances.
German Orizola, a researcher from Spain, has described the biodiversity present in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. German Orizola's work focuses on amphibian groups and has shown that frogs in Chernobyl have darker skin color than those living outside the exclusion zone, which may be a form of radiation defense. The negative effects of radiation have also been studied, such as some insect species having shorter lifespans in Chernobyl and more albino bird species appearing. Or like the barn swallow Hirundo rustica, which has been extensively studied by scientists and found that those living in this area have smaller brains, more damaged DNA and more physical abnormalities. These birds seem to change their behavior when facing radiation risks, because they choose to build nests in the least contaminated areas of the zone. Specifically, evolutionary ecologist Timo Timichow collected blood samples from wild dogs living around the power plant for DNA analysis, aiming to understand their complex genetic structure. According to estimates, over 800 dogs live in and around Chernobyl, often maintained and fed by power plant workers coming for maintenance. They exist as 3 separate populations, though recent analysis shows genetic mixing and surprising kinship relationships among them. Additionally, scientists from Russian, Canadian, and American laboratories have collected plant samples from the Chernobyl area.
They are extensively studied in laboratories to analyze the consequences of radiation.
Surprisingly, they discovered these plants had developed resistance to higher radiation concentrations rather than mutating. Specifically, through molecular-level analysis, researchers found increased genome methylation processes. This is a catalyst for DNA repair and production of enzymes protecting against radiation, turning them into superplants. Residents around the ghost town. Not only residents, many scientists have come to Chernobyl to study radiation's effects on human life and wildlife. Among them was biologist Elena Bantrova in the early years following the disaster. She came to Chernobyl with her husband Sergei Lapaya and Soviet scientists to explore the area. Elephant. This is a black, shiny mass formed from radioactive lava that flowed out before solidifying. Its radiation is so strong that a person standing nearby for 5 minutes without protective gear would die. Bantrova and Lapaya belong to the small group of residents permitted by the Ukrainian government to live long-term around the power plant. To date, they have lived here for over 30 years and have no intention of leaving, considering Chernobyl their home. The exclusion zone has only a few residents each year, who are brave individuals returning to their homeland after the evacuation order. Residents here mainly eat food grown in their gardens and harvested from forests, such as a type of mushroom that thrives and absorbs Cas-137 well. Sometimes they are used as fuel for household stoves. The pits used for these stoves may contain radioactive material, so when burned, a small amount of radiation still disperses into the environment. It's unclear since when, but residents here have considered radiation as their daily companion. Among the 7,000 people moving between the area and workplaces, over 4,000 work in 15-day per month or 4-day per week shifts to reduce exposure to ionizing radiation. They are security personnel, firefighters, scientists, or workers in the reactors even though they are not operational.
Employees come to the nuclear power plant by train daily, even though it no longer produces electricity.
The decommissioning of the 3 remaining reactors will continue until at least 2065. In 2016, a massive new concrete dome was installed over the ruins of reactor number 4 to prevent radioactive material from leaking into the environment. It will remain here for a century, but the materials used to construct it will remain radioactive for thousands of years. The question arises whether this dome truly protects residents from materials with a 24,000-year half-life, or is merely psychological comfort making them feel safe in Chernobyl. There are also other threats, such as forest fires burning radioactive trees that could create new dangerous clouds.
Certainly, the exclusion zone today has less radiation than before, but in Chernobyl, time seems to pass differently.
Residents here consider human lifespan to be 35 years instead of 60 years. This perception is not random, as materials like CS-137 or strontium-90 have half-lives of about 30 years. It can be said that the 1986 Chernobyl disaster was an extremely frightening and horrifying catastrophe. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Enigmatic Echoes channel so you don't. And now, goodbye and see you again.